Hello and welcome to this Marketing and Communications Watch webcast brought to you today by the Conference Board. We will talk about how to future-proof the luxury business. I put luxury in little quotes because really we're going to talk about any brand that goes beyond being a commodity and is able to demand a premium price. Specifically, we'll talk about how this current crisis, and it's really a multiplicity of crises, might reshape this sector as well, the habits and behaviors of its users and consumers, as well as the company, and how it might actually stimulate and accelerate development and bring us the future faster, which I think will probably be one aspect of this discussion. And of course, we'll look at what the future of luxury consumption and luxury marketing and communications might look like. My name is JP Kuhwein. I'm a principal at Uber Brands, where I actually advise brands on how to elevate themselves. I've written a book on that very subject that's coming out soon. I teach brand elevation at Columbia University, and most relevant in the context of this discussion, I lead the Marketing Institute here at the Conference Board. And today, I'm joined by a truly distinguished panel of experts that helped me go through this. I want to introduce them one by one. Ladies first, we have Pamela Dansinger here. On my left, right, top, bottom, depending on how you look at it. Pam is the founder and owner of Unity Marketing, and she's been researching, because she's really a research-focused consultant, she's been researching particularly the affluent consumer, their behaviors and mindsets, which I think will be particularly valuable in our discussion. She's written a ton of books in the area of premium brand consumption, luxury. For example, I like these titles: Why People Buy Things They Don't Need, a question that many marketers wonder about. Let Them Eat Cake, like that little hint there. And importantly, Meet the Henrys. Now, the Henrys are not a bunch of guys, but they are high earners that are not rich yet. Get it? Henrys. And they are a very important mass affluent target for this premium and prestige business we're going to talk about today. And she's also written a book about shops that pop. That's the title again, which is about retailing, which will be another element we're going to talk about. So thanks for joining us, Pamela. You're clearly overqualified to be on the panel.
Well, I thank you for going through my bibliography, but it's great to be with you today.
And you're joining us from the woods, I heard in the earlier discussion, is that right?
Yes, I live in the country. I live in Lancaster County, which is famous for its Amish, and every day I have horses and buggies going up and down my street, and actually it gives me a great deal of objectivity because I can get to New York, Philadelphia, Washington easily, but I'm just far enough away to be objective.
Excellent, excellent. I went to Lancaster University, but the UK one. A point of objectivity by having multiple points and perspectives is also what's going to distinguish the next panelist. It's Milton Pedraza. Milton is the founder and CEO of the Luxury Institute, which deals with, you guessed it, luxury. He's developed really a very kind of neuroscience, emotional intelligence-based education system for how to credential luxury, to use a specific word here. Luxcelerate, I think he called it. He trademarked it, and it kind of serves to improve the brand experience externally towards the customer, but also the culture that is lived by the organization. And organization is another area we want to talk about. Milton has a deep network of experts that he draws on for his consultancy. He also coaches premium prestige brand leaders personally. And recently he's developed a particular appetite and expertise for the area of big data and the personal data economy, and how that might actually be a great tool to use in the luxury industry, where personalization and personal customer relationships can be so important. So bringing in the technology here, and as so often luxury might actually be an early adopter and kind of show the way. Milton, thanks for coming over. It's not, you were born in Colombia, but you are in New York. You're grown up in America, is that right?
Some people say I'm too Americanized, but I love it. And I'm in Boca Raton today, and I'm honored to be here with these great speakers. I learned, Pam was one of the pioneers that I learned from. And I'm so grateful to be sharing the panel. And Erwin, you're one of my favorite people. I love your book. And JP, you're an icon to me. So I'm very honored to be here with you all.
Well, don't be so humble. Milton also has a nice perspective in that, yes, he's got the Luxury Institute, but he's also got a broad global background in consumer marketing, having worked for, I think, Colgate, among others, if I remember from earlier conversations. So again, a very broad perspective. And which brings us to our last panelist, Erwan Rambourg. Yes, he's French, so what else do I need to say? He's got luxury flowing through his blood and gourmandise and connoisseurship of all kinds. But beyond that, he's also learned it to master it. And again, nicely, he's worked at LVMH and Richemont, two of the largest luxury groups in the world, in management. And now, I think for the past 15 years or so, has been an analyst, a financial analyst and researcher in this area, working for HSBC as a director of consumer and retail equity research. So very nice combination of perspectives as well. And of course, Erwan also has written 2 books. The latest one is called Future Lux, very appropriately for our conversation. And then, like he lived in Hong Kong before, even though our paths never crossed there. I don't know how that could happen in a dense city like that, where he also has written another book that is kind of a reference, which is Bling Dynasty, and which talks about how China is a overwhelmingly important market when it comes to luxury. And I'm sure we'll touch on that as well, because that's where a lot of the growth is in the premium priced product segment. I think that even rhymes almost. So welcome, Erwan. You're not in Paris, though. You're also in New York. Is that right?
Yes, I'm at home in New York. Thanks a lot for having me. And I was honored that you would invite me, JP, and honored to meet you, Pam and Milton, sharing a century of experience.
Enough already.
On luxury, as you put it.
To punish you for all this honey, we're going to call you Irvin to make it easier on us Anglo-Saxons. I'm German, by the way. And all of them, you know, you will have seen on TV. As seen on TV, you might have heard any of their names on NPR, CNBC, or read about it in the Wall Street Journal, and so on and so on. What will we be talking about? As I said, luxury and premium business broadly. There are many definitions to luxury, and in fact, that's one of the interesting aspects we're going to talk about. There is not only the classic, but the prestige, the mastige, the lifestyle, the affordable luxury, the democratization of luxury, the tech lux. We're going to talk about that, don't you worry, and about its overall role in the economy and its overall role also in guiding other branded products, which is an interesting aspect as well. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about your questions because we want to hear from you. So everyone, please feel encouraged to use that chat function. We're going to keep an eye on and ask us questions. We'll try to slide all of them or most of them in, which brings me to a special little sub-community here among our listeners, which is the people who are interested in earning continued education credits. Let's get that slide up. You can earn those, but of course we don't give them away for free. You actually need to respond to some questions we're going to ask you all of a sudden, and then hopefully you'll succeed in answering them and stay awake. So continued education people and everyone else, please get ready, ask questions. And with that, I want to dive right into it. When we set up this discussion and this panel, some people said, well, do you think it's appropriate? You know, we've got a global health crisis raging. We've got social and political tensions at minimum, to say the least. You know, is it appropriate to talk about that? On top of it, we're talking about a polarized recovery. You know, we had the U shape, the V shape, the whatever. Now people talk about the K shape, i.e. it's going great for some people, which people assume is luxury, and very bad for others, which people assume that's like the regular stuff. So isn't it frivolous to talk about luxury? And we thought about it, and we think, no, it's not, because luxury is an important sector of the economy in terms of jobs, in terms of contribution, in terms of technology, marketing, etc. Plus, luxury is also suffering, as we'll see. And to get started on that point, I want to turn first to Irvin to give us a little bit of a macro perspective of, you know, what's the role of luxury, what is it as a category, and then I ask the others to jump in as well with their perspective. Irvin, what do you say about the role of luxury in kind of a macro fashion?
I think you've seen a pretty big rebound. You know, you're talking about shapes of recovery. We saw a V-shaped recovery in China. We're seeing a K-shaped recovery here, i.e., you know, unfortunately a sort of social societal split between the have and have-nots. We have seen a good rebound, which is more linked to equity markets, the property market, and staycationing in the U.S. But to your point, it's a lot of jobs, and it's you know, the resilience that we're seeing, or the comeback, I should say, that we're seeing in the U.S. Is actually fortunate for a lot of people who work in the industry. What I would say is, during the crisis, also the luxury sector has proven to be, you know, good corporate citizens, giving back to communities, repurposing production sites to produce hand sanitizers and PPEs and the like, giving to charity, building hospitals in Milan, like Montclair, for example. So, yeah, I mean, on the face of it, you could think it's inappropriate. The reality, the economic reality of luxury is it's a very big sector, employing a lot of people, notably in France and Italy, but also here in the States. With the rebound, you're seeing a lot of job creation. And again, from a philosophical point of view, I think the luxury sector has become better at giving back.
Got you. Now, Milton, you are much into kind of credentialing of the product, which always strikes me that the more premium a product gets, the more it's about experiences, the more services are involved. It would seem to me that that means a lot of jobs. Do you notice that when you look at, I don't know, Colgate and LVMH, that there's more people going around, at least in the customer-facing side of the business?
I'll give you an example. So years ago when I was working with Gucci, just a few years ago, they had 7,000 employees. Today, Marco Bizzarri recently said they have 12,000 employees, and those are all clean, well-paid, good training jobs that allow people to build life skills for careers they can go on to in other places. So the jobs, I think, as Irvin said, are phenomenal, and they continue to grow as the luxury industry has grown. I think the other thing that people don't realize, let's think about automotive innovation. The first crash tests were done by Mercedes. The 3-point seatbelt was invented by Volvo, and that was given away to society. And all of the innovations in auto safety that we have today that are mass were innovated by the luxury industry. So I think there's tremendous amount of contribution to society. I think the third piece is that they champion causes. Kering was the first one to take on human trafficking. Gucci has done that. Date rape, which wasn't a popular cause, but was the necessary one to address. I just look at the luxury industry, and I think that it's full of good people with good purpose, and they put their money where their mouth is when it comes to social causes.
And I'm assuming you're not biased here, but I hear the trickle down. Pam, you wanted to say something?
I think it's really important to recognize innovation is happening, and that's where it comes from luxury. Remember, cell phones used to be a luxury, and today everybody's got them. So it really does contribute to our whole culture, our society over time. Luxury becomes mass, and then luxury has to elevate again.
Which actually, you know, I teach brand strategy at NYU. One strategy for any brand, even in consumer packaged goods, to finance new technology, starting up, you know, capital-intensive new production processes, etc., is to first premium price that product to kind of win back the capital investment you get, and then you can, make it cheaper, which also naturally happens as more competition moves in, et cetera, et cetera. So that makes a lot of sense. Pam, I had another question for you, which is, we're talking luxury, and I put it in quotes. I like to put it in quotes because everyone has a different definition of what luxury is. And there are many derivations also that are being talked about. I said before, there's new luxury, there's affordable luxury, there's lifestyle versus luxury and fashion. Can you give us a little bit, what's your definition of luxury? You've written a book entitled Putting the Lux Back into Luxury. So it seems like you feel it's slipping.
Well, and I'll be very interested to hear what the other panelists say, but to me, luxury is completely and totally self-defined. What's luxury for me is very different, I'm sure, than luxury for you, JP, or Milton, or anybody. So it's hard to put sort of an objective definition around what is luxury when it really is based upon the eye of the beholder. So I think what we need to do as an industry and what every brand needs to do is focus on the consumers and focus on the consumers who ultimately are the ones who can afford luxury. I mean, luxury is higher priced, and that means the affluent. So I think we really need to keep a focus on who's got the money and what they value, and most importantly, what their motivations are. When I look at luxury today, I see there's a lot of confusion about conspicuous versus inconspicuous consumption. And they're chasing a lot of, what I think of as China as being more conspicuously consumption-oriented, versus other markets like the U.S., which is more inconspicuous in many categories, where you don't want to advertise that you're part of the elite by the brands you wear and the logos you have on. So I think we really gotta understand that motivations are so different, and understand the motivations, and that really means understanding the consumer. And one of the things I see is if you're a brand that has to call yourself luxury, then you're probably
Wonderful
not
point.
luxury.
I always make that point to my students. It reminds me of a ad that shocked me in the 2020 Super Bowl from Genesis, a Chinese car manufacturer, where it was all about, we're the new luxury. Just because you say it and you recruit some celebrities, it might not work that way. Now, that said, though, Irvin, we had a great podcast. I'm going to do a plug here since it's for the conference board as well, on your new book, on the Off the Shelf podcast. And you said something interesting, which was, well, JP, luxury is not only about the high income rich, which reminded me of my own assistant when I worked in Hong Kong. Can you fill us in on what that discussion was all about?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Pam that you can define it in many different ways. As you said, I'm a financial analyst, so technically, financially, you could say luxury is defined by returns on invested capital being above the weighted average cost of that capital. I would say, more importantly, luxury used to be about scarcity. It used to be about finding it difficult to get that product. I think now it's more the illusion of scarcity, because there are very few brands that have proper scarcity. And at the end of the day, I would say luxury, especially in tough times, is basically what puts a smile on your face, what changes your outlook for the day. Luxury is something that's not necessary at all, but that you crave because it changes your outlook, basically. So again, it could be a product, it could be a service. It used to be, I think what you're referring to is, it used to be that you had a lot of ubiquity in the space, and people were fed up of seeing the same brands and the same logos, and they wanted something that was more specific. I think luxury is this illusion of scarcity, giving you the illusion that you're the only one buying that handbag, you're the only one getting that communication, you're the only one being exposed in a very bespoke manner.
And what I was also referring to is that the source of income for luxury companies is often surprising. My assistant in Hong Kong bought a handbag. I can't, unfortunately for her, I can't tell anymore which brand it was. I want to say it was Louis Vuitton, I'm not sure. But the important point was, I knew that she must have spent at least 1 or 2 net monthly salaries on that. But then she was bringing her lunch to work. She was living at her parents', and that was just this important piece of defining status, fitting in with her friends, making a statement, etc. That was her luxury expression of that. So often you will be surprised where the profits of these groups comes from. It's not necessarily from the highest priced items. It might be those belts and wallets and handbags rather than the haute couture or the $50,000 pieces of whatever it is. Which brings me
I
a little
agree.
bit
It's not about financial means. It's about priorities. Yeah. It's not about financial means only.
Motivation.
Right. Now, Milton, I wanted you to jump in because I know you take the definition of luxury much beyond precious materials and provenance and, you know, expensive items. You take it a lot into the area of, you know, very personalized service, wellness, maybe even financial service and others. Can you tell us a little bit about these softer expressions of luxury?
Yeah, I think there are two perspectives to luxury. The first one is that, yes, you can survey, as we do every year, thousands of the top 10% of consumers, and they'll tell you that the highest quality and the highest design and craftsmanship and service and brand heritage matter. So that's as objective as you can get, but it's still subjective. The best example that we learned, and I think it really resonates with what Pam said, is that you can have two billionaire families. So affordability is not an issue, to Erwin's point. One of them will arrive at a hotel and they will want the presidential suite, right? They will insist on everything custom, but they arrived in a Toyota and they drove 4 hours to get there. The other family will come in and say, honey, we're not going to waste money on the presidential suite. Let's take a regular room. Oh, but they arrived in a private jet and a limo to get there. And so I think what you've said about everything being so personal is absolutely true. And I think it's two dimensions. What do I, as a consumer, once affordability is not an issue, feel I want my luxury constellation to look like? And that's the freedom of luxury, I think. The next one is when the brand personalizes for you, do they know you well enough to not only deliver on those functional benefits the way you want them, but also on the emotion, the joy that I think you were referring to, Erwin, right? And I would say it's the return not only on invested capital, if you will, for the consumer, it's return on invested time. So I want the functional and emotional benefits that I get to bring me that joy, that satisfaction. And again, it's a completely individualized thing, and that's what we need to teach associates to, of course, deliver on the expertise, but also to deliver on empathy and trustworthiness and kindness.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we've got a question here that popped up, which is right on point. Maybe we can stay with you, Milton, for a second on this one, which is that, you know, luxury is a lot about physical interaction. Think of fashion shows, art exhibits, wine tastings, and so on and so on. They're all shut down right now, at least it seems. Have you come across any examples of how the industry overcomes that in this time of forbidden contact? And might that point to some ways we're going to do this in the future? Virtually, I guess, is what most people are thinking about.
So one, I think there's no substitute. When all your five senses are operating face-to-face with another human being, there is no substitute for that. Now, having said that, the feedback we have from wealth advisors who deal with billionaires and centimillionaires, they have told us that paradoxically, by doing Zoom calls where they didn't have to travel, the client didn't have to travel, they were able to spend more time with the client, right? So that's a paradox. The client has now more time to engage with the wealth advisor, with the real estate advisor, with the travel advisor. And that the clients, because they feel vulnerable, are willing to touch on subjects now, for example, generational transfer of governance for the family, that they normally would not touch. So there are some paradoxes in this. I think that from now on, yes, I'll do up a curated personal shopping experience with my client, with my personal shopper, and it'll be on Zoom. And by the way, companies like Farfetch have that. They have private client groups, and they've been engaging on Zoom. But I think there will be no substitute for at least some of the engagement to be that wonderful, rich human experience. Human touch, maybe not physically, but emotionally. All the five senses are working when I engage face-to-face with you, right? And that is
interesting.
Enriching.
it reminds me of another conversation I had the other day where somebody said being able to master all the intricacies of financials, of managing taxes, of managing even college applications, etc., that is also part of the true luxury. You know, you need to be able to have the resources to manage yourself through that. So it shows you how broad this field is. Pam, you've written about retail that pops. At the moment, a lot of the retail stops. And also, a lot of luxury actually happens in small retail. I'm thinking of beautiful flower arrangements. I'm thinking of bespoke jewelry, even here in my village in New York. How are these people doing? Have you heard about some great stories there, or is it all as terrible as we see on TV?
Well, I just wrote an article on Forbes based on a survey of small independent retailers, and most of, like 50% of those retailers do not expect that they're going to be able to, they have the financial resources to survive another couple of months of the tight problems that we have. And then, of course, the second wave of the pandemic is coming, and you know, it may mean that we're going to have some closures too. So I think we're in a very, very vulnerable spot in terms of retail. Looking a little bit further out, though, when travel comes back, I think we're going to see a lot more activity. I mean, because a lot of luxury purchases are related to to people traveling, going one place or another. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of that returning. But the question is, can you hold out? And I mean, the big companies are protected. The smaller independent boutiques, smaller designers, I think are in a very vulnerable spot. I mean, I'd be interested in what Erwin has to say about that.
It's interesting you say that. Before we get to Erwin, and I definitely want to hear his perspective on that. I did talk, for example, to someone who has a flower business, and they said they had the best business ever so far in the last 15 years. I've talked to somebody who prints greeting cards. Imagine a very old, you would think outdated analog business, and they said it's through the roof because people are at home, they think more, they have more time, they want to write something personal because they're not so time pressed anymore, spending time, you know, in the commute, etc. It seems to me that the picture looks extremely different depending on who you look at. I also talked to a luxury hotel group, and they said hotel business, terrible. Luxury suites or entire homes or vacation stays, long-term vacation stays, through the roof, even at $15,000 a night.
And interior designers are reporting exactly the same thing, that their business is, but you know, it's not across the board. That's one thing I think we should say.
Erwin,
it's how you, I mean, really, it's how you feel about it, how you feel about your business.
Right. Erwin, can you tell us, when you look at categories in the sector or in this tier, if you like, and you look at the globe, do you see clusters? Can you say, oh, there it happens this way or there it happens that way, or is it a total confusing picture?
Well, I mean, to Pam's point, you have, I think you have a sort of buy less, buy better attitude. So unfortunately, indeed, the bigger brands or the bigger groups are crushing it, and the small independent guys are struggling. So there is a sort of form of Darwinism, if you will. I would look at it with a glass half full approach, thinking that there's always a lot of opportunities and silver linings in crises. And this time around, it's probably going to be the same. I mean, to Milton's point, I think there's a relationship that counts, an emotion that counts, an intimacy that you need to put in place. And I think this is a time of reinvention. So sales associates of traditional luxury brands are going the extra mile to sell via Zoom, to come to your place in the Hamptons if you have one, to basically think out of the box and become better and creative. And I think this creativity is going to generate a lot of new business models and ways of functioning, which will serve the future.
Right. Now, you said, though, big brands are advantaged. I think one section of your Future Luck book predicts a continued kind of concentration in this area. Is that, do you think that's even being accelerated by COVID, i.e. the Louis Vuittons not only gobbling up Tiffany & Co., but probably many more in the next couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, you just got the announcement of a deal from Montclair yesterday, and you got Supreme being sold to VF Corp the week before. And yeah, I think clearly synergies are there in terms of people, in terms of your weight in negotiation with shopping malls, or getting better media rates. I think there are more and more advantages of scale that are becoming pretty obvious. And so, unfortunately, to your point, we just ended a decade with the biggest deal in history, which was LVMH Tiffany. And I believe that starting next year when the world reopens, you'll have a flurry of deals and consolidation going further.
All right, excellent perspective. We get here a question around talk about the consumer. We'll get to that in a second, promise. But since we talked about consolidation, we talked about Tiffany's, I burned to ask Milton and Pam a question around that, which is, do you feel or do you fear, maybe it's emotional, that this gobbling up, this accumulation of portfolio brands ultimately leads to a standardization? Let me explain. I've been at Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble has, at the time, 10 different laundry brands, Cheer and Tide and Gain and Era. But at the end of the day, same bottle, same technology, same TV channels, very similar advertising. So sometimes you struggle to differentiate. Do you feel like that will happen in luxury as well and kind of make it boring, or do you see luxury handling that differently? Whoever wants to talk first.
I'd love to hear Pam first.
Oh, don't get me started on Tiffany and LVMH.
I know, it's a trigger. It's a trigger.
I understand the motivation for gobbling up smaller brands. I understand the power of LVMH, which has been, is enormous. But I just think that sets us up to chasing short-term goals rather than long-term. And luxury, I think, needs to be very long-term focused. So, I mean, I guess LVMH and Arnault have been able to immunize themselves from so much short-term thinking. But I think ultimately it's not going to be good for luxury as a whole. But it opens a lot of opportunities for new brands, innovative brands with new ideas about luxury to come in and take a foothold, as we are seeing today.
I agree. I think the group served a really great purpose. They've nurtured some incredible brands. They've nurtured some incredible genius. They do collaboration, and they create jobs, and the fact that they're strong helps you to nurture brands. The brands in the middle are in trouble, but the brands that are being backed by investors, I'm an angel investor, by investors, venture capital, the direct-to-consumer lines, there's a tremendous amount of innovation. And Supreme and Glossier and many other entities that are in every category. And remember, luxury isn't just goods, it's services too. So you have facials and all kinds of wellness. There's so much innovation. And I think that's something that needs to be pointed out. There's a tremendous amount of innovation in healthcare, in luxury healthcare, which will eventually get to the masses. Instead of getting a blood test where you're getting 20 markers tested, you get 80 markers tested, and your genes and your genetic data is now being used. So I just think that the innovation is limitless. I think brands that are stuck in the middle are in deep trouble, but the groups and the startups that eventually rise very quickly now are the lifeblood of the industry, and they will continue to thrive.
All right, good perspective. So let's get to the luxury consumer. And let me attempt here kind of an amalgamated summary profile, if you like, of that luxury consumer. If I take kind of Pam's perspective and Irvin's and Milton's together, then I would say, it's this upwardly mobile, not rich yet, but good income, younger consumer and if she lives in the US or Europe, and it's increasingly a she, that's where a lot of the growth is apparently, correct me later if I'm wrong, then she also looks racially diverse in terms of their background, but mostly in metro cities, but across the nation. Pam, two questions. One, am I right with this general description? And B, if that's right, what about the Gen X boomers and so on, which apparently still make up 60 to 80% of discretionary spending? Should we just, forget about these old people like us?
Well, no, and I mean, in fact, the boomers are living longer. They're living active lives longer. They're working longer. They have accumulated more wealth than any other generation. So I think it's a huge disservice and mistake to forget all about the boomers. It's interesting. If you look at how incomes rise, incomes grow, they reach their peak between 35 years and 55 years of age. And then after that, people start retiring and income comes down a little bit. I mean, now millennials are over 35 years old. So millennials aren't even all that young anymore. So it's just, I think, we look at age and we look at generations. I mean, that's just one demographic and one way of slicing it. You've really got to overlay it with income. You've got to overlay it, and again, with motivation, which doesn't have any demographic markers, quantitative markers on it. So I think that boomers really still are very important. Gen Xers, they're a much smaller generation, but they are right there in the peak now in terms of earned income, and millennials are coming along fast and furious after that.
What about the argument that if you design for the kind of metro city diverse she in her 25 to 30s, you'll attract the suburban white 50s woman as well, or maybe even the men. Does that work for you?
Well, being a baby boomer myself, I look around and I say, my peer, I'm still 25 in my mind. So, and you gentlemen, maybe you have a slightly different perspective, but I don't segment myself and say, this is a age-appropriate fashion versus something that's too young. It's like I want whatever I want. I mean, and I think that that's going to be an ongoing trend that we're going to see, particularly in fashion. It's just like, why do I want to pigeonhole myself? Why do I want to define myself as an old lady? It's like, please, I'm much younger than that.
Irvin, I know you have a strong opinion on that. Tell us about why you think that the millennial really is it, even if we keep hearing that they're the first generation, maybe in a long generation, who earn less than their parents did.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of human nature and fitting in. I think, especially in China, to a lesser degree here in the States, people buy luxury young because they're buying their place in society. They're buying being part of the club, being acknowledged by their family members, coworkers, hoping that it will help them be more visible, get a promotion, whatever the case may be. I was quite interested by your comment, Pam, because you sound like you're 25 as well and alive and kicking. And I would say that there was a period of time when, 15, 20 years ago, you had this idea that daughters looked up to their moms to know what was cool. And I think that's been flipped to a certain extent. I think people, our generation, are looking down on our kids and thinking, ooh, where do I get my cues in terms of fashion, what's hip, what's not, etc. So I think there's a great degree of, popular culture and influence that the youth is having on us.
Yes, I agree. And it's interesting, growing up as a baby boomer, I mean, there was something we called the generation gap back in the day. When I was a teenager, I didn't want to be anything like my parents. Today, with the younger people, they do not have, there's no generation gap. My millennial age children look up to me. I look up to them, and they teach me, and it's much more fluid and much more, I think, positive ultimately.
Yeah. One point I'd make that I think throughout history, the highest performing luxury brands have been ageless and timeless.
Yes.
And I think that's a lesson that needs to be learned. And I think that, you know, when acting studios came, they dressed the daughter and the mom, and they didn't have this, you know, separation or segregation, and they didn't think about color. They thought about ageless and timeless. They wanted to market to a mindset. And I would say, to Pam's point, Pam, I'm actually 28, but the point is that it's been proven that we all think with our young mindset. I would also add that, of course, as we get older, we have different needs. So I'm investing more in my health. I'm waiting for this universal, you know, personalized healthcare to come through and help me live my 80s, my 90s in a healthy way. And I think that's coming. So I think that our priorities change. Of course, I need to spend money on the wealth advisor and on the real estate agent and all that. That's just, I think, a natural evolution of life stage. But do we still want to look good and be happy and be joyous? I think luxury brands need to remember that about older people.
Yeah, more than ever.
Now, Milton, you often talk about very personalized high-end services. You dropped the private jet and so on earlier. When we think about, you said previously, Pam talked about the generation gap. We're still talking about the gender gap, about the racial gap, and inequalities when it comes to income or access to services. Do you see a shift in the last, call it 10 years, at the very top end of the luxury market, or on the contrary, do you see shifts by seeing it become more equal in certain areas that maybe will come through, or does it continue to be a very male wasp thing when it really gets to the real estate, the mega yachts, the islands, and all of that typical haute luxury stuff?
So two things. I was raised by women, so I have a strong bias about that because I am a product of who they are. In fact, I've been told I have a feminine mind, to which I take that as a compliment, right? The other day I was talking to another investor, and he said, you know, I was raised by my mom. I'm like, me too. He said, you know what? We're chicks. And we are. So I think that emotional intelligence. So it's to make a point that in the beauty industry, most of the senior level executives, except for the founders, are women. The retail CEOs are women. So it is getting better. By no means have we achieved a level of equality, and in not only in women, but in people of color and different preferences. So I think that we're in a golden age where now, starting in this decade, we're recognizing that just talking about it is not enough. That now luxury needs to lead. One suggestion I made to one of my favorite CEOs of all time, I won't mention who they are, that they have an army of frontline associates who are top performing, that they should bring in Stanford or Harvard to do part-time programs to get their skills up to the level where those young people of many, many different colors, races, genders can rise to be at the top level. There shouldn't be a ceiling at the store. Oh, you get to be regional manager at best. No, you should be able to strive to be the CEO of a company. And by the way, that group, that CEO, they have listened. So I think that we're on the verge of change, but I do want to say something else. I'm Hispanic, right? I don't think that while we go on this journey, we should leave anyone behind, including Caucasian men, because I know so many Caucasian men who made my future. I am the product of those men as well. And so the one thing I want to do is when we say inclusive, let's be inclusive. Let's be generous and kind to everyone. Let's not leave anyone behind. And that would be my final point on that.
It's a good one.
Interesting. Now, you brought up organization, actually, which is a point that we get some questions here around. Maybe, Irvin, you got the global view and you've been inside these organizations, Richemont, LVMH, etc. Do you see a shift in how they're set up, in the skill sets, in the composition of talent, as you have gone in and out of that industry over the last 15, 20 years or so? And what are your observations in that area? Oh, Irvin is frozen. I didn't realize that. Maybe we'll ask Milton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was getting ready for Erwin's response.
I looked at Erwin and I was worried whether something's wrong. I think he's totally frozen. Maybe
So what's the question, JP?
the production people can help us. No, I was asking whether over the last 10, 20 years or so, you kind of mentioned it. You've seen an evolution of the organizations that are behind premium and luxury brands, maybe a professionalization, but also in terms of, how the organization, who are the constituents in the organization, what their skill sets are, and what are the trends that you're seeing there?
Well, first of all, I want to say that how could we not have more women in the leadership positions rising when women start having better grades at kindergarten?
Yeah.
They have the highest graduation rates in law schools, MBA programs, maybe science and technology because they've been held back. But so how could we not, if the top performers in school were women, then we obviously should see them rising to the ranks. That's been held back, but now I see that much better, meaning we're starting to see the numbers. Now we're starting to see boards of directors and in politics. So we're getting there.
Yeah, Pam, now you're looking at retail across all sizes. Do you see certain trends there as far as gender gaps, professionalization of skill sets, et cetera, is concerned?
Well, I see in retail that we're making progress, and in certain industries, but in wealth management, for example, we're not seeing it. In real estate, obviously, it's mostly women. Thank God.
The question was really for Pam, Milton, but thanks for answering for wealth management. No, but I'm particularly interested, Pam, because I know you look also into the kind of small, medium, particularly retail enterprises. What do you see there?
Well, I think that women are starting more businesses than men too. I think that they are the entrepreneurs. I think one of the things that has to be talked about when we talk about women in whatever position you're talking about is we've got this biological function called, maternity, pregnancy, having babies. And that is a definite interruption for any woman's life. And I suffered, personal, career disruption because I got pregnant inconvenient for my boss at a big corporation. So, it's one of the things that I think we really need to develop sensitivity and support for women at all different ages. Because if you have a gap of 4, 6, 8 years, no matter how highly educated you are, how can you catch up with the men who've been working straight on through? It's really difficult.
Right. Erwin, welcome. Not back. Okay, he was just back. He's gone again. I'm gonna save my question for him for later, and I'm gonna move on because there was interest in this big data and personalization question that I alluded to earlier, which is a lot of luxury services are about personalization. And I know, Milton, you're burning to tell us that big data is a huge boon, is an opportunity there. So talk to us about that. And then maybe we can have Pam be kind of the devil's advocate and probe on some of the privacy concerns that people have around that. Milton, shoot.
Okay, first of all, I'm a strong believer that individuals should control, not necessarily own, control their personal data. And that part of the freedom of that is that they can license their data to ethical brands that they trust, like a Gucci or a BMW. Remember, luxury brands are not known to exploit or manipulate you, okay? So that's the background. But the other thing is that you have to understand technology to understand that today you can do that with privacy. You can do that with encryption, anonymization. In the near future, we'll have edge AI so that companies don't want your data. They want the insights. So imagine that in the future, in the very near future, or that you can create a server with decentralized data pods that you want a credit score? Here's all my data. It's verified and authenticated by me. The algorithm comes in and calculates my credit score. Now, what left my device? Did any data leave my device? Can the individuals who calculated my credit scores know me? No. All they know is that they calculated a credit score, and then it'll be back to the bank. And the same thing with personal offers. The same thing with your MRI. The algorithm will come in by consent into your device. The MRI will be sitting there. It will be diagnosed. So I think that people who think that privacy and personalization are binary haven't caught up to the fact that technology is already addressing those problems. And I don't say that with any arrogance. I think the luxury industry has been neglectful in allowing Amazon to use data and algorithms to personalize better than the luxury industry. Of course, we need to have that nurturing and that human connection that comes with the luxury industry. Amazon is a soulless transactional utility that we need, right? So we should be personalizing at that level and then adding the emotional intelligence.
So Pam, do you have examples of beautiful personalized experiences that are database for the luxury sector? Have you come across those, or do you feel like it's becoming an Amazonization really of services?
Well, you know, and I think what Milton is doing related to the privacy concerns, I think is a great move, because we should own our data. You know, I'm learning about what Facebook knows about me, and it really does frighten me. At the same time, you know, data is one thing. What really you need to do is interpret data, and that still takes the human mind. And I foresee a lot of opportunity for people like me, market researchers who are good at manipulating and understanding statistical data, but to be able to interpret it and what does it really mean. I think lots of organizations are, you know, I've heard the expression, drowning in data but starved for information. They just don't know how to make sense of it. And, you know, I think that's the real opportunity, and I think there'll be a lot of opportunity with that personal, emotional intelligence to interpret mathematical, statistical data.
But let's not think that they're mutually exclusive, because when this spreadsheet, which is a very low form of technology, came, accountants actually became more desirable because they could interpret, they could do 50 scenarios, they could give advice. The accountants who were into calculation and the researchers who are into like only stats, the machines will completely overwhelm them. But the human expertise and judgment, whether you're a personal shopper or a doctor, will always be in demand.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But you know, there continues to be a difference between the robo-investor and I guess the personal investor, even after all these years of fintech evolution. So I guess that's where the difference is. Unfortunately, we keep losing Irvin because I'm burning to ask him a question. But let me start out with you then, and if he comes in, let's jump on him while he's online. Which, interestingly, Milton, you said, well, you know, luxury companies, they're not known to abuse your data. And Irvin earlier said that, you know, luxury companies are doing very well as far as corporate citizenship, etc., is concerned.
Okay.
My question is, really? What gives you the confidence, maybe start with Pam, that Tiffany or Mercedes or Hermes, pick your brand. We can also say Peloton or, you know, maybe a more modern luxury Tesla brand. What gives you confidence that they would treat you any better when it comes to your privacy, when it comes to the environment, slave labor, or other things, than the average company in their sector, the Hyundais or the Subarus?
I don't have an answer for that, because it really all does come down to trust. Trust in what are the motivations of the people running the companies. What is the I mean, you can say all kinds of things on your About Me page, About Us page, about what you stand for, but are you really putting it into action? I mean, I think it's a question of corporate citizenship and responsibility, and I don't have an answer for that. I just don't.
I do have an answer.
What gave you that confidence to state that earlier on, that you think they wouldn't abuse your data, or not as much as maybe other competitors?
Well, first of all, there's no track record of luxury brands actually trying to manipulate you the way that the Social Dilemma program on Netflix shows that social platforms are doing. So there's no evidence ever of that. Second, when you're dealing with sophisticated consumers, it's very difficult to hoodwink them and to abuse them for very long, okay? They're highly educated and they have a lot of money. But the third thing, I think, to answer Pam's question is, I do have an answer for that. You can trust, but you can verify. So today there is blockchain, right? So you can authenticate where the product came from. Today there's blockchain that you can track where your data is going. There are regulations. So to me, data is like fire. So to me, when fire was invented, I'm getting a little bit of blowback.
Yes, I think Pam, maybe go on mute.
Just to say that.
Yes.
Just to say that when fire was invented, humans used it for heating and for cooking. Today, because of regulations, because of safety features, because we have all kinds of stopgaps and we surrounded fire with safety, what you're doing when you're taking a plane is you're going on a projectile full of fuel that is doing combustion as you're going along, in case you hadn't noticed. But we're still using fire mostly for good in this world. There are instances of, so data is the same way. We're going to have to regulate it. We're going to have to blockchain it. We're going to have to track it. We're going to have to hold people accountable. And we're going to do that. That is not an option, and it's going to happen. Now, Erwin is back, so we better hand it over.
The interesting insight here was, it is a more educated consumer. It's a more demanding consumer you deal with. So maybe with that comes a higher drive to handle things responsibly and, be transparent, etc. That was an interesting insight. Well, ladies and gentlemen, time is flying. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I have a few slides. Since Erwin is back, I want him to start before he snaps out of the conversation again, or is he frozen already? No, his eyes are blinking. To wrap us up here in the last couple of seconds, where do you turn for trends and insights about what luxury and premium brands look like? Are there some good sources? And then finally, where should people go if they want to know? Where should you know about if they want to know? You have 20 seconds. You have 20 seconds.
So where would I turn? I'm sorry for blanking out. I would turn to the people within the industry. I used to work in the industry, and I speak mostly to people who are still there. But I would look at cosmetics, I would look at tech, and I would look at China to understand what's going to happen in the West. I would look at more fast-moving consumer goods and tech, and I would look at China as a bit of a wake-up call in terms of what could happen next and the speed of change. And then in terms of keeping in contact, I mean, you mentioned the book that I just put out 2 months ago. I could be contacted on LinkedIn. I can be contacted by email, whatever works.
Pam, where do you look for the future of luxury?
Well, I'm just digesting surveys and studies and articles every day. I'm getting pitches for my work on Forbes.com. I'm really trying to stay abreast, and my focus again is not so much the companies as it is the consumers and what motivates them and interests them. So that's my sweet spot.
And you've got a rich blog at Unity Marketing. And then finally, Milton, we have 5 seconds left. Tell us quickly, where do you look for the future when it comes to luxury?
I study AI.
AI, there we go. And you're at the Luxury Institute. And with that, I need to wrap up, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. We've got a couple of slides here to share, which basically tell you about upcoming webcast programming. We've got one on the 28th that I'll do with Greg Monaco on personal branding. It's going to be very interactive if you want to, i.e. there's a little bit of pre-work you can do to kind of shape your personal brand and build a powerful personal and influential profile. Then we have our popular MNC webcast series, which are called The Time Is Now, that are coming up on Jan 14th about tech devices and media platforms, and on February 11th on culture and Black and Hispanic Gen Zers. So again, generational insights here that are of value. And then finally, last slide, I want to invite you to look at our library. There is a very rich podcast offering, including the Influencers podcast, but also the aforementioned Off the Shelf podcast, where you can hear about a lot of books. Pam, we still need to have you on that podcast, so that's marked. We already have Irvin with his book on Future Lux. And with that, on the last 2 seconds, I want to say thank you again to my esteemed panelists here, Milton, Pam, Irvin. Thanks a lot for your insights, and see you all soon.
Very soon.